Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Frontier and watched the stars shift around him as his ship moved through space at incredible speed. The exploration vessel was one of humanity's newest ships, built with the best technology. They had learned from their alien friends in the Interstellar Covenant. For 3 years now, humans had been part of this great galactic alliance, and Jake felt proud to serve as one of Earth's representatives among the stars. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the gentle beeping of various control panels. Jake's crew of 42 men and women worked at their stations with the calm efficiency that came from months of training together. They had been chosen for this mission because they were some of Earth's best, and Jake trusted each of them with his life. Admiral Lisa Campbell's face appeared on the main communication screen, her image flickering slightly due to the vast distance between the frontier and Earth. She looked tired. Jake noticed, with dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there when he had last seen her in person 6 months ago. The responsibility of coordinating humanity's expansion into galactic society was taking its toll on her. "Jake, I'm transmitting. Your final orders now," Admiral Campbell said, her voice carrying the weight of authority that had made her one of Earth's most respected military leaders. "You're to proceed to the Kepler colony in the neutral zone and deliver the humanitarian supplies we discussed. The colony has been caught in the middle of fighting between the Zephyrians and the Mordak Empire, and they desperately need medical supplies and food." Jake nodded as he received the encrypted data package containing detailed information about his mission. The Kepler colony was a small human settlement that had been established 2 years ago as part of humanity's expansion program. Like many of the outer colonies, it was located in disputed territory where different alien empires sometimes clashed over resources or territory. "The Covenant Council has assured us that the route through Sector 779 is completely safe," Admiral Campbell continued. "Their intelligence reports show no hostile activity in that area for the past month. You should have a clear path to Kepler and back." Commander Ryan Torres, the ship's tactical officer, looked up from his station with a slight frown on his weathered face. Ryan was a veteran of several peacekeeping missions and had developed an instinct for danger that had saved lives more than once. Something about this mission felt wrong to him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. "Admiral, requesting permission to take an alternate route," Ryan said, stepping forward to address the screen. "I've been studying the tactical reports, and Sector 779 has been awfully quiet lately. Sometimes quiet means trouble." Admiral Campbell shook her head. "I appreciate your caution, Commander, but we need to maintain good relations with our Covenant allies. They've provided this intelligence specifically to help us, and going against their recommendations would send the wrong message. Besides, taking an alternate route would add 3 days to your journey, and the people at Kepler Colony don't have 3 extra days." Jake understood the Admiral's position, but he also trusted Ryan's instincts. Still, orders were orders, and humanity's relationship with the Covenant was too important to risk over what might just be excessive caution. "We'll follow the recommended route, Admiral. The frontier is fast and well-armed. If we do run into any trouble, we can handle it." The communication ended, and Jake turned to address his crew. Chief Engineer Kate Williams was already running final checks on the ship's systems, her skilled hands dancing over the control panels as she monitored everything from the quantum drive to the life support systems. Kate had been with Jake for 2 years, and he had never seen her fail to keep a ship running, no matter what challenges they faced. Communications Officer Ben Parker sat at his station, carefully monitoring all the various radio frequencies that ships used to talk to each other across the vast distances of space. Ben was young, only 25, but he had a gift for languages and had already learned to communicate with 12 different alien species. His ability to understand alien communications had proven valuable on several previous missions. All systems are green, Captain, Kate reported. The quantum drive is running at peak efficiency, and we have enough power and supplies for a round trip to Kepler with plenty to spare. Communication channels are clear, Ben added. I'm picking up normal traffic from shipping lanes and a few military patrol reports, but nothing unusual. Jake settled into his captain's chair and gave the order to begin their journey. The frontier. Smoothly accelerated as its quantum drive engaged, warping space around the ship to allow it to travel faster than light. Through the view screen, Jake watched as the stars stretched into long lines of light, a sight that never failed to amaze him, even after years of space travel. The first day of their journey passed without incident. The crew followed their normal routines, and Jake spent time reviewing the mission files and the latest reports from other human colonies scattered throughout this region of space. Humanity was still new to galactic society, and every mission provided valuable experience and knowledge that would help future expeditions. On the second day, as they approached the border of the neutral zone, Ryan began picking up unusual energy, readings on his sensors. At first, they were faint and intermittent, the kind of background signals that could come from any number of sources in space. But as the hours passed, the signals became stronger and more focused. Captain, I'm detecting what might be ship engines about 6 light minutes ahead of us, Ryan reported, his voice tense with concern. The signatures don't match any known human or Covenant vessels. Jake studied the sensor readings on his personal display. The energy patterns were definitely artificial, but they were unlike anything in the databases that the Covenant had shared with humanity. Could they be civilian ships? Maybe traders or colonists? Ryan shook his head. The power output is too high for civilian vessels, and they're arranged in what looks like a patrol formation. Captain, I strongly recommend we change course and avoid this area. Jake felt torn between his trust in Ryan's expertise and his orders to follow the Covenant's recommended route. The Alien Alliance had been nothing but helpful since humanity had made contact with them 3 years ago. They had shared technology, provided star charts, and helped establish the first human colonies outside of Earth's solar system. It seemed impossible that they would deliberately mislead humanity about the safety of this route. We'll proceed as planned, Jake decided. But raise our defensive shields and prepare the weapon systems. If these are hostile ships, we'll be ready for them. The next hour passed slowly as the frontier continued toward the unknown vessels. Jake's crew worked quietly at their stations, but he could feel the tension building on the bridge. Everyone knew that humanity's ships were fast and well-armed, but they had never been tested in a real battle against experienced alien warriors. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission, Ben suddenly announced, his voice filled with surprise. It's on an emergency frequency, and it's coming from one of those ships ahead of us. Put it on screen, Jake ordered. The image that appeared was of a Zephyrian commander, his blue-scaled face marked with the ritual scars that indicated high military rank. The Zephyrians were one of the more aggressive species in this region of space, known for their powerful warships and territorial nature. Human vessel. You will stop your engines and prepare to be boarded, the alien commander said in heavily accented English. Your ship and crew are now prisoners of the Zephyrian Empire. Jake stood up from his chair, anger flashing in his eyes. This is Captain Morrison of the UHS Frontier. We are on a humanitarian mission in neutral space under the protection of the Interstellar Covenant. You have no authority to detain us." The Zephyrian commander's expression didn't change. "The Covenant Council has informed us of your mission, human. They have also informed us that your species has become a threat to galactic stability. You will surrender now, or we will take your ship by force." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. The Covenant had told the Zephyrians about their mission, but they had also somehow convinced them that humanity was a threat. This wasn't a random encounter or a case of mistaken identity. This was a deliberate trap, set up with the help of the very allies that humanity trusted most. "All ships, this is Admiral Kresh of the Zephyrian fleet," the alien commander continued. "The human vessel refuses to surrender. Begin attack pattern 7. The communication cut off, and immediately the Frontier's sensors showed multiple ships moving to surround them. Jake realized with growing horror that they had flown directly into an ambush, guided there by intelligence provided by their supposed friends in the Covenant. "Ryan, evasive maneuvers," Jake shouted. "Kate, give me everything the engines have. Ben, send an emergency message to Earth immediately." The ship shuddered as the first enemy plasma bolts struck their shields, and Jake knew that his crew was about to face the fight of their lives. The emergency transmission from the UHS Frontier reached Earth 3 days after the ship had been captured, carried by a hidden relay beacon that Ben Parker had managed to activate just before the Zephyrian boarding parties had taken control of the bridge. The message was short but devastating in its implications for all of humanity's future among the stars. President Daniel Hayes sat in the secure conference room deep beneath the Global Defense Council building, his face pale as he listened to the recorded words of Captain Morrison's final transmission. Around the table sat the most powerful leaders of Earth's unified government, men and women who had guided humanity through its first steps into galactic society and now faced the possibility that those steps had led them directly into a carefully prepared trap. "The Covenant has betrayed us," Morrison's voice said through the speakers, the sound crackling with static from the damaged communication system. "This was a trap. They knew we were coming. They told the Zephyrians exactly where to find us. If anyone receives this message, do not trust the Covenant Council. They are not our friends." Director of Intelligence Amy Foster stood at the front of the room, her usual calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled anger. For months, she had been receiving reports from her agents throughout human space that had made her increasingly suspicious of their alien allies, but she had been unable to prove anything concrete until now. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just heard confirms our worst fears," Amy said, activating a holographic display that showed a detailed map of human settlements throughout the galaxy. "For the past 6 months, my people have been investigating a series of incidents that seemed like accidents or coincidences. Supply shipments that went missing, communication failures at critical moments, and intelligence reports that turned out to be completely wrong." General Chris Murphy, the newly appointed head of the Human Defense Force, leaned forward in his chair as he studied the holographic map. Red markers indicated locations where problems had occurred, and even to his military-trained eye, the pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. "They've been setting us up for years," Chris said grimly. "Every piece of technology we shared with them, every star chart we provided, every detail about our military capabilities. They've been gathering intelligence for a coordinated attack on all human settlements." President Hayes felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a physical force. When humanity had first made contact with the Interstellar Covenant, It had seemed like the answer to every dream that humans had ever had about finding their place among the stars. The Alien Alliance had welcomed them with open arms, shared advanced technology, and helped establish human colonies on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. "How many people are we talking about?" President Hayes asked quietly. Amy manipulated. The holographic display and numbers appeared next to each human settlement. Approximately 4 million Earth citizens are currently living in colonies outside our solar system. Another 2 million are serving on exploration and trade vessels throughout Covenant space. If the aliens move against all of our settlements, simultaneously, we could lose 6 million people. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of the potential catastrophe. Humanity had spread throughout the galaxy with the confidence that comes from having powerful friends watching your back. Now they realized that those friends had actually been studying them like laboratory specimens, learning their weaknesses, and preparing for the moment when they would strike. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the brilliant physicist whose quantum drive technology had made humanity's rapid expansion possible, spoke up from her position at the far end of the table. "There's something else we need to consider. Every ship we've built in the past 3 years has been constructed using designs that were approved by Covenant technical advisors. They know exactly how our weapons work, how our shields operate, and how our engines function." "Are you saying our own ships are compromised?" General Murphy asked. Elena nodded grimly. "I've been reviewing the technical specifications, and there are dozens of small modifications that the Covenant advisors suggested. At the time, they seemed like improvements, ways to make our systems more compatible with galactic standards. But now I'm wondering if some of those modifications might actually be backdoors that would allow them to disable our ships remotely." President Hayes felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. The betrayal was even worse than they had initially realized. Not only had humanity's allies been planning their destruction, but they had also been sabotaging human technology from the very beginning. "What about Earth itself?" President Hayes asked. "How vulnerable are we to a direct attack?" General Murphy activated his own section of the holographic display, showing the defensive systems that protected humanity's home world. "Earth has the strongest defenses of any human settlement, but they were designed to work alongside Covenant forces, not against them. If they attack us with their full fleet strength and use their knowledge of our defensive systems, I'm not sure we could stop them." The president looked around the table at the faces of the people who would need to guide humanity through the crisis that was about to engulf them. Some looked frightened, others angry, but all of them showed the same determination that had driven humans to reach for the stars in the first place. "What are our options?" President Hayes asked. Amy Foster touched a control, and the holographic display changed to show estimated military strengths for both sides. The Covenant Alliance includes 17 different species with a combined fleet strength of over 50,000 warships. Humanity has approximately 2,000 ships, most of which are exploration vessels with limited military capabilities. "So we're outnumbered 25 to 1, General Murphy said flatly. "In a conventional war, we wouldn't last 6 months." "Then we don't fight a conventional war," Dr. Rodriguez said firmly. "We do what humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. We adapt, we innovate, and we find a way to turn our weaknesses into strengths." President Hayes felt a spark of hope for the first time since receiving Morrison's message. Throughout human history, their species had faced extinction-level threats, and had always found a way to survive and thrive. They had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and natural disasters that should have wiped them out completely. "What do you have in mind, Doctor?" he asked. Elena stood up and began pacing as she spoke, her mind already racing with possibilities. The Covenant's greatest advantage is their superior numbers and their knowledge of our current technology. But they've made one critical mistake. They think they understand how humans solve problems. But they've only seen us operating within their system, following their rules and using their approved methods. "Go on," General Murphy encouraged. "For 3 years, we've been good students, learning everything they taught us about galactic civilization and trying to fit in with their established ways of doing things," Elena continued. "But that's not really who we are as a species. When humans are truly threatened, we don't follow the rules. We break them, we create new ones, and we do things that nobody expects." Amy Foster nodded slowly as she began to understand what the physicist was suggesting. "You're talking about asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale." "Exactly," Elena said. "We can't match their fleet strength, but we don't need to. We need to make them fight the kind of war where numbers don't matter, where their knowledge of our old technology becomes useless, and where their predictable military doctrines become liabilities." President Hayes felt the same excitement he had experienced years ago when humanity had first developed faster-than-light travel. They were standing at the edge of another breakthrough, another moment when human ingenuity would create possibilities that had never existed before. "How long do we have?" he asked. General Murphy consulted his tactical reports. "Based on the pattern of incidents that Amy's people have been tracking, I estimate we have maybe 6 months before they launch a coordinated attack on all human settlements. That's not much time to completely redesign our entire military approach." "It will have to be enough," President Hayes said firmly. "Dr. Rodriguez, I'm giving you unlimited resources and authority to develop whatever technologies you think we need. General Murphy, start recalling all of our ships and personnel from Covenant space, but do it gradually so we don't tip them off that we know about their plans." Amy Foster raised her hand. "What about the people we can't evacuate in time? There are colonies that are too far away or too integrated with alien populations to withdraw without causing suspicion." The president's expression hardened. "Then we make sure that when the Covenant attacks those colonies, they get a very unpleasant surprise. Whatever weapons Dr. Rodriguez develops, we're going to deploy them everywhere humans have settled. When they come for us, we'll be ready." Elena was already thinking about the kinds of technologies that might give humanity the edge they needed. Stealth systems that could hide entire fleets, weapons that could strike across impossible distances, and artificial intelligence systems that could outthink any biological enemy. "There's one more thing," she said. "We need to assume that everything we've shared with the Covenant has been compromised." 6 months after the emergency meeting in the Global Defense Council building, human space had transformed into something that would have been unrecognizable to the peaceful explorers who had first ventured beyond Earth's solar system. Hidden research facilities operated around the clock on dozens of worlds, their locations known only to the most trusted members of humanity's leadership, while scientists and engineers worked with a desperation that pushed the boundaries of what had previously been thought possible. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the main laboratory of Research Station Alpha, a facility built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in an unmapped region of space far from any Covenant patrol routes. Around her, the brightest minds that humanity had ever produced worked at experimental equipment that represented leaps forward in technology that should have taken decades to achieve, compressed into months by the knowledge that failure meant extinction. The first breakthrough had come just 2 months into the project, when Elena's team had discovered a way to bend space-time itself around a ship, creating a field that made the vessel effectively invisible to all known forms of detection. The technology built on humanity's existing quantum drive systems, but pushed them far beyond anything the Covenant had ever seen or imagined. Test number 47 is ready to begin, announced Dr. Kevin Park, the young engineer who had designed the prototype stealth system. His hair was disheveled from weeks of 18-hour workdays, but his eyes burned with the excitement of someone who knew he was creating something revolutionary. Elena watched through the reinforced observation window as the test ship, a small fighter craft designated Ghost 1, powered up its experimental cloaking device. The ship seemed to flicker for a moment, like a mirage in the desert, and then it simply vanished from sight. Even knowing exactly where it was supposed to be, Elena could see nothing but empty space. "All sensors show negative contact," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the monitoring station. "Electromagnetic, gravitational, quantum resonance, even the new detection methods the Covenant shared with us 6 months ago. As far as any scanning system is concerned, that ship doesn't exist." Elena felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with grim determination. The Ghost-class stealth fighters would give humanity its first real advantage in the coming war, but she knew that invisibility alone wouldn't be enough to overcome the Covenant's massive numerical superiority. They needed weapons that could strike with devastating effectiveness and disappear before the enemy could respond. Captain Steve Johnson, the test pilot for the stealth program, activated his communication system from inside the invisible ship. Steve was one of humanity's most experienced combat pilots, chosen for this program because of his ability to think creatively under pressure and his willingness to test experimental technology that might kill him if something went wrong. "Cloaking. System is operating perfectly," Steve reported. "All ship systems are functioning normally, and I have complete mobility while invisible. Beginning attack run simulation now." Elena watched the tactical display as Ghost 1 moved through a series of combat maneuvers, striking at simulated targets and then vanishing again before defensive systems could lock onto it. The ship could appear anywhere without warning, deliver devastating firepower, and fade away like a ghost, leaving only destroyed enemies and confused survivors who had no idea what had hit them. "This is exactly what we needed," Elena said to General Murphy, who had arrived at the research station to observe the latest tests. "A single Ghost-class fighter can take out targets that would normally require an entire squadron, and the enemy will never see it coming." General Murphy nodded approvingly, but Elena could see the concern in his eyes. "How many can we build in the time we have left?" "Our best estimates suggest we can have maybe 200 Ghost-class fighters operational before the Covenant attacks," Elena replied. "It's not enough to match their fleet strength, but it should be enough to give them some very unpleasant surprises." The general's expression remained grim. 200 fighters against 50,000 enemy ships. We're going to need more than just invisibility." Elena led him to another section of the laboratory, where Colonel Rachel White was overseeing humanity's most ambitious project. Rachel was a former Special Forces officer who had been chosen to head the Nemesis Protocol, a program that represented a completely new approach to space warfare. "Show him what we've built," Elena said to Rachel. Rachel activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional model of what looked like a small, unremarkable spacecraft about the size of a fighter jet. "This is the Nemesis Mark I autonomous combat drone," It's equipped with artificial intelligence systems that are generations ahead of anything the Covenant has ever seen, and it has the ability to operate independently for months without any human supervision. General Murphy studied the hologram carefully. It looks too small to be effective against capital ships. That's the beauty of the design, Rachel explained. Each Nemesis drone carries a miniaturized quantum core that can generate enough energy to destroy a ship 10 times its size. But the real advantage isn't in individual firepower. It's in what happens when you deploy them in large numbers. Rachel manipulated the holographic display to show a swarm of hundreds of Nemesis drones moving through space in complex patterns. The artificial intelligence system allows them to coordinate their attacks with perfect precision. They can share information instantly, adapt their tactics in real time, and work together in ways that no biological crew could match. "How many can we build?" General Murphy asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Elena said with the first smile she had shown in months. Each Nemesis drone has the ability to self-replicate using raw materials it finds in space. Asteroids, space debris, even destroyed enemy ships can be converted into new drones. Deploy 100 Nemesis units in an enemy system, and within a week you could have 1,000. General Murphy's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. "You're talking about exponential growth, a force that gets stronger every time it wins a battle." "Exactly," Rachel confirmed. "The Covenant's advantage in numbers becomes meaningless when we can create new forces faster than they can destroy them. And because each drone is controlled by artificial intelligence, we don't risk human lives in the process." Elena led them to the final section of the laboratory, where her most secret project was nearing completion. The reality engine was a quantum computer the size of a small building, capable of processing information at speeds that had previously been considered impossible. Its purpose was to analyze every aspect of the coming war and provide humanity with the strategic intelligence they needed to survive. "This system can simulate entire star systems in real time," Elena explained, as they walked past rows of quantum processors that hummed with barely contained energy. "It can predict enemy movements, identify weak points in their defenses, and suggest optimal strategies for maximum damage with minimum risk to human forces." Dr. Lisa Chen, the brilliant computer scientist who had designed the reality engine's artificial intelligence systems, looked up from her workstation as they approached. Lisa had been working almost non-stop for months, designing software that could think faster and more creatively than any biological mind. "We've just completed a full simulation of the Covenant's likely first strike strategy," Lisa reported. "The computer has identified 17 critical targets that, if destroyed simultaneously, would cripple their ability to coordinate attacks across multiple star systems." Elena felt a surge of hope as she studied the tactical recommendations that appeared on Lisa's display screen. For the first time since learning of the Covenant's betrayal, she began to believe that humanity might actually have a chance of surviving the coming war. "There's something else," Lisa continued. "The reality engine has been analyzing all the intelligence data we've gathered about Covenant military doctrine and strategic thinking. It's identified several patterns that suggest they're not prepared for the kind of warfare we're planning to use against them." General Murphy leaned forward intently. "What kind of patterns?" "Their entire military philosophy is based on overwhelming force and direct confrontation," Lisa explained. "They've never faced an enemy that uses stealth, misdirection, and asymmetric tactics. More importantly, they've never fought against artificial intelligence systems that can adapt and evolve faster than biological minds can think." Elena nodded, as she began to see the complete picture of humanity's strategy. We're not going to fight them ship to ship or fleet to fleet. We're going to appear out of nowhere, destroy critical targets, and vanish before they can respond effectively. By the time they figure out what's happening, their entire military infrastructure will be in ruins. Captain Morrison's voice suddenly crackled through the communication system, transmitted from a hidden relay station that had somehow managed to intercept messages from the captured crew of the UHS Frontier. Morrison and his surviving crew members had been held prisoner aboard a Zephyrian ship for months, but they had managed to gather critical intelligence about Covenant military preparations. "This is Morrison to any human forces receiving this transmission," the captain's voice said, weak but determined. The first Covenant attack began exactly as Captain Morrison had warned, with massive fleets emerging from hyperspace near 15 human colonies scattered throughout the galaxy. The alien commanders expected to find unprepared settlements defended by a handful of lightly armed patrol ships, easy targets that could be destroyed within hours to send a message to the rest of humanity about the price of resistance. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in their thousands of years of galactic warfare experience. Commander Ryan Torres materialized out of empty space in his Ghost-class stealth fighter just as the Covenant fleet finished forming. Up around the New Austin colony, the enemy ships hung in space like a constellation of death, their weapons powered up and ready to rain destruction down on the human settlement below. There were 47 alien warships in total, enough firepower to glass an entire planet if they chose to use it. Ryan had been rescued from the captured UHS Frontier just 2 weeks earlier in a daring operation that had cost the lives of 12 human commandos, but had also provided critical intelligence about Covenant military tactics and ship designs. Now he commanded a squadron of 20 ghost fighters, invisible ships that the enemy had no idea existed. "Ghost Squadron, this is Torres," he transmitted to his pilots using encrypted quantum communication channels that the Covenant couldn't detect or intercept. "Remember, we hit fast and hard, then disappear before they can lock on to us. Target their command ships first, then their heavy cruisers. Make every shot count." The attack began without warning as 20 invisible fighters opened fire simultaneously on the Covenant fleet. Quantum torpedoes materialized out of nowhere to slam into enemy shields, while plasma beams struck from impossible angles as the ghost fighters used their cloaking systems to attack from positions where no ship should have been able to exist. Admiral Kresh, the Zephyrian commander who had captured the UHS Frontier months earlier, watched in growing horror as his supposedly invincible fleet began taking casualties from an enemy he couldn't see. His flagship's sensors showed nothing but empty space, yet his ships were exploding one after another as invisible weapons tore through their defenses. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Kresh ordered desperately. "Full sensor sweep on all frequencies. Find those ships and destroy them." But the ghost fighters were already gone, having struck their targets and vanished back into invisibility before the enemy could respond. In less than 5 minutes, the Covenant had lost 8 warships, including 2 heavy cruisers, while the human attackers had suffered no casualties at all. Ryan smiled grimly as he watched the enemy fleet scatter in confusion, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos as each captain tried to protect his own ship from an enemy they couldn't locate. Phase 1 complete. Beginning Phase 2. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out at every human colony under attack. Ghost fighters appeared without warning to strike at enemy fleets, while swarms of Nemesis drones began emerging from hidden positions throughout human space to launch coordinated attacks on Covenant military installations. Colonel Rachel White watched the battle progress from the command center of Research Station Alpha, where the reality engine processed millions of data points every second to coordinate humanity's defensive efforts. The quantum computer had identified the optimal timing and targeting for each attack, ensuring that every human weapon was used with maximum effectiveness. Nemesis swarms are reporting successful infiltration of 7 Covenant military bases, reported Dr. Lisa Chen from her position at the Reality Engine's control interface. They're systematically destroying shipyard facilities, supply depots, and communication arrays. Rachel nodded with satisfaction as she watched the tactical displays show Covenant infrastructure crumbling throughout their territory. The self-replicating drones were doing exactly what they had been designed to do, multiplying rapidly as they consumed enemy resources and converted them into new weapons to use against their creators. "What's the status on the Vega shipyards?" Rachel asked. Lisa consulted her displays, where real-time reports from the battlefield continued to stream in. Captain Johnson's strike team successfully penetrated their shield perimeter using quantum tunneling technology. The entire facility is offline, and they estimate it will take at least 6 months to rebuild the manufacturing capability. Captain Steve Johnson had led the most daring mission of the war so far, using experimental technology to literally teleport his squadron of ghost fighters inside the Covenant's most heavily defended shipyard complex. The facility had been protected by energy shields that should have been impossible to penetrate, but human scientists had found a way to use quantum mechanics to bypass the barriers entirely. The psychological impact of the attack was even more devastating than the physical damage. For the first time in their history, the Covenant faced an enemy that could strike anywhere, anytime, regardless of their defensive preparations. Their most secure facilities were no longer safe, and their military commanders were beginning to panic as they realized they were fighting a war they didn't understand. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the battles from her laboratory aboard Research Station Alpha, watching as her technologies proved themselves in actual combat. The quantum stealth systems were performing even better than she had hoped, while the Nemesis drones were exceeding all expectations for both effectiveness and replication rates. "Elena, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth," announced Communications Officer Ben Parker, who had been rescued along with Captain Morrison, and was now coordinating intelligence gathering from captured Covenant communications. President Hayes appeared on the main display screen, his face showing the strain of coordinating humanity's war effort from Earth while trying to keep the alien alliance from discovering the full extent of human technological capabilities. "Dr. Rodriguez, your weapons are performing beyond our wildest expectations," President Hayes said. "But we're picking up increased Covenant fleet movements throughout their territory. They're pulling ships back from their frontier regions and massing them for what looks like a major counterattack." Elena had been expecting this development. The initial strikes had been designed to disrupt Covenant operations and demonstrate humanity's new capabilities. But she knew the aliens would eventually adapt their tactics and try to overwhelm human forces with sheer numbers. "How long do we have?" Elena asked. "Our intelligence suggests they'll be ready to launch a coordinated offensive in approximately 2 weeks," President Hayes replied. "They're assembling the largest fleet in galactic history, over 12,000 ships, and they're planning to attack Earth directly." Elena felt a chill run down her spine, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the ultimate test of whether human innovation could overcome impossible odds. "Mr. President, I need you to authorize the deployment of Project Omega," Elena said quietly. President Hayes was silent for a long moment, clearly understanding the implications of what she was asking. Project Omega was humanity's most closely guarded secret, a weapon so powerful that even Elena wasn't entirely sure what would happen when it was used. "Are you certain it will work?" President Hayes asked. "No," Elena admitted, "but it's our only chance against a fleet that size. The Ghost Fighters and Nemesis drones are effective against individual enemy formations, but 12,000 ships attacking simultaneously would overwhelm our defenses." President Hayes nodded slowly. "You have authorization for Project Omega. Do whatever you have to do to protect Earth and our people." The transmission ended, and Elena immediately began preparing for the most dangerous experiment in human history. Project Omega was based on the same quantum technology that powered their stealth systems and faster-than-light drives, but pushed to levels that bordered on the theoretical limits of what was physically possible. Over the next 2 weeks, as Covenant, forces continued to mass for their final assault on humanity. Elena's team worked frantically to complete the Omega weapon system. The device was designed to create a controlled collapse of space-time itself, generating a wave of destructive energy that could theoretically destroy an entire fleet instantaneously. The weapon had never been tested at full power, and the computer simulations suggested there was a significant chance it might destroy Earth along with the attacking fleet. But as Elena watched the tactical displays showing 12,000 enemy ships approaching humanity's home world, she knew they had no choice but to take the risk. "All human forces, this is Elena Rodriguez," she transmitted on all frequencies, as the Covenant fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. "Omega weapon is armed and ready. All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance immediately." Admiral Morrison, who had been promoted after his rescue and now commanded humanity's defense fleet, acknowledged the order and began pulling all human ships back behind the orbit of Mars. The handful of human vessels looked pitifully small compared to the massive alien armada that was advancing toward Earth, but Morrison knew that appearances could be deceiving. Elena's finger hovered over the activation control for Project Omega as she watched 12,000 enemy ships accelerate toward humanity's home world. The Omega weapon fired with a flash of light that was visible from every planet in Earth's solar system, creating a wave of controlled space-time distortion that swept outward from humanity's home world at faster-than-light speeds. The 12,000 ships of the Covenant fleet, caught in the expanding field of quantum destruction, simply ceased to exist as the very fabric of reality around them collapsed and reformed in the space of a few seconds. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the tactical displays in stunned silence as the largest military force in galactic history vanished without a trace, leaving nothing behind but empty space and the shocked crews of human ships who had witnessed something that should have been impossible according to every known law of physics. "Omega weapon has successfully fired," Elena reported to President Hayes on Earth, her voice barely above a whisper as she tried to process what had just happened. "Enemy fleet has been completely destroyed. No human casualties reported." The silence that followed her report seemed to stretch for an eternity, as the reality of what they had accomplished began to sink in. Humanity had not only survived the Covenant's betrayal, but had utterly destroyed the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen, using technology that the aliens couldn't even begin to understand. President Hayes finally broke the silence, from his command center deep beneath Earth's surface. "Dr. Rodriguez, your weapon worked perfectly. The alien fleet is gone, but we're detecting massive communication traffic throughout Covenant space. It looks like word of what happened here is spreading rapidly." Elena nodded as she began shutting down the Omega weapon system, which had consumed more energy than most star systems produced in a year. The weapon could only be fired once before requiring months of recharging, but she hoped they wouldn't need to use it again. "Mr. President, I recommend we begin immediate diplomatic contact with individual Covenant species," Elena said. "They've just seen their most powerful fleet destroyed in seconds by a weapon they can't detect or defend against. Some of them are going to want to negotiate rather than face the same fate." Over the following weeks, humanity's assessment proved correct as one by one the member species of the Covenant Alliance began sending diplomatic messages to Earth requesting negotiations. The careful alliance that had taken centuries to build was crumbling as each species decided that continuing to fight humanity was a path to certain extinction. Ambassador Kevin Clark, who had served as a colonial administrator before the war, found himself thrust into the role of humanity's chief negotiator with the former enemies who had tried to wipe his species from existence. Kevin had lost friends and family members in the Covenant attacks, but he understood that humanity's long-term survival depended on building a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than revenge. The first species to formally surrender were the Altarians, a peaceful race of scientists and explorers who had been reluctant members of the Covenant from the beginning. Their ambassador, a tall, graceful being with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes, met with Kevin aboard a neutral space station in the Proxima system. "We wish to express our deepest regret for the actions taken against your people," the Altarian ambassador said in carefully practiced English. "Many of our leaders opposed the plan to eliminate humanity, but we were outvoted by the more aggressive species in the Alliance." Kevin studied the alien diplomat carefully, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. After months of war, it was difficult to trust any member of the Alliance that had betrayed humanity so completely, but he also recognized that not all Covenant species had been equally guilty. "What assurances can you give us that your people won't simply join another alliance against humanity in the future?" Kevin asked directly. The Altarian ambassador gestured in what Kevin had learned was their equivalent of a solemn oath. "We propose a new form of partnership, one based on genuine equality and mutual benefit rather than the domination model that characterized the old Covenant. We have scientific knowledge that could benefit humanity, and we hope to learn from your remarkable technological innovations." Similar conversations were taking place throughout the galaxy as former Covenant species sought to distance themselves from the failed attempt to destroy humanity. The Zephyrians, who had been among the most aggressive advocates for human extinction, found themselves isolated and facing the full weight of human military technology as ghost fighters and Nemesis drones systematically dismantled their remaining fleet assets. Captain Steve Johnson, now promoted to admiral and commanding the most advanced ship in humanity's fleet, oversaw the final surrender of the Zephyrian Empire from the bridge of the UHS Revelation. The massive warship incorporated every technological breakthrough that humanity had achieved during the war, making it more powerful than entire Covenant fleets had been just months earlier. "This is Admiral Johnson to the Zephyrian High Command," Steve transmitted to the alien leaders who had orchestrated the original betrayal of humanity. "Your military forces have been completely neutralized. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will begin targeting your civilian infrastructure." The response came quickly, transmitted by the same Admiral Kresh who had captured the UHS Frontier at the beginning of the war. The alien commander's voice was filled with defeat and resignation as he acknowledged the reality of his species' situation. "We surrender to human forces," Kresh said simply. "We request mercy for our civilian population and ask to negotiate terms for our future relationship with your people." Admiral Johnson felt no satisfaction in the enemy's surrender, only relief, that the bloodshed was finally coming to an end. The war had cost thousands of human lives and had forced his species to develop weapons of almost unimaginable destructive power, changes that would forever alter humanity's place in the galaxy. President Hayes addressed the peoples of Earth and all human colonies from the same room where he had first learned of the Covenant's betrayal nearly 2 years earlier. The man who had guided humanity through its darkest hour looked older and more tired, but his voice carried the strength and determination that had seen his species through to victory. My fellow humans, the war against the Covenant Alliance has ended with their complete surrender, President Hayes announced, to a galaxy that was still trying to understand how such a dramatic reversal of fortune had been possible. We have proven that humanity cannot be underestimated, cannot be betrayed without consequences, and cannot be destroyed by any force in this galaxy. The president paused as he considered the magnitude of the changes that lay ahead for humanity and their former enemies. But victory in war is only the beginning of our real challenge. We must now build a new galactic civilization based on principles of equality, cooperation, and mutual respect. We must show the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength is not our weapons, but our ability to turn enemies into allies and create something better than what came before. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now recognized as one of the greatest scientific minds in galactic history, established the Institute for Advanced Human Technologies on a space station that existed partially outside normal space-time, a location that made it impossible for any potential enemies to locate or attack. The Institute would be responsible for developing the next generation of human innovations, while also sharing selected technologies with the new allies who had proven their commitment to peaceful cooperation. The reality engine, the quantum computer, that had coordinated humanity's victory, was expanded and improved to become the central intelligence system for the new Galactic Federation that was emerging from the ashes of the old Covenant. Unlike the previous alliance, which had been dominated by a few powerful species, the new Federation gave equal voice to all member civilizations, regardless of their military strength or technological capabilities. Commander Ryan Torres, the tactical officer whose warnings had saved the UHS Frontier crew from complete annihilation, became the first human to command a mixed-species fleet as the new Federation established joint peacekeeping forces throughout the galaxy. The ships under his command included former enemies who now served alongside human crews, united by their shared commitment to preventing the kind of betrayal and warfare that had nearly destroyed them all. 5 years after the end of the war, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the UHS New Frontier, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first interstellar city. The massive space station would serve as the capital of the new Galactic Federation, a symbol of the cooperation and unity that had replaced the fear and suspicion of the old order. Morrison reflected on the journey that had brought humanity from the brink of extinction to leadership of a galactic civilization that included dozens of species and thousands of worlds. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed them had ultimately made them stronger, forcing them to develop capabilities they never would have achieved during peacetime. The galaxy had learned that humanity's true power didn't come from their weapons or their technology, impressive as those had become. It came from their refusal to accept defeat, their ability to innovate under impossible pressure, and their capacity to forgive former enemies and build something better together.